Where's the baby?
Son of a bitch! I threw the baby out with the bathwater!
Oh well, I guess we'll have to make another one.
You men are all alike!
The Spiritual Shitshow Podcast with Suzanne Soul, episode 27.
Hello, you delicious legends, and welcome to the Spiritual Shitshow Podcast, where we get into the crazy train, the healing and spiritual awakening journey can be. I'm your host, Suzanne Soul, comedian, lifelong spiritual student, and I'm sharing some of the tasty treats I've learned along my journey that have helped me, and that I hope help you too. You know how sometimes life hits you with one of those, what the actual fuck moments? Like losing someone you love, or being blindsided by joy, or having an existential breakdown in the frozen food aisle. Well, my friends, that's where myth can step in like a druid with a flashlight, whispering in the dark from ancient times, saying, "Hey, thoroughly modern Millie, you ain't the first one to feel this way." So this is part 3 of my series on the Power of Myth series presented on PBS, where journalist Bill Moyers had 6 conversations with the legendary author and mythologist Joseph Campbell. And in this episode, I'm talking about the message and the myth, aka the conversation that changed my motherfucking life forever. But seriously, this episode felt like Campbell reached into the back of my soul, dusted off all the half-formed thoughts I'd had all my life, up to that point that I didn't know how to articulate, and said, "Here, let me help you put words to the spiritual angst you've been carrying around since before puberty." And I was like, "Thanks, Joe." Listening to this classic-style, scholarly, yet delightful, gray-haired academic with a necktie and 0 TikTok presence say out loud what I felt deep down spiritually, but never had the confidence or vocabulary to express, was beyond anything I had ever experienced. Even when the Brady Bunch had a reunion special in the 90s, saying things like, God is a name, God is an idea, but its reference is to something that transcends all thinking. The ultimate mystery of being is beyond all categories of thought. And I remember thinking, oh, wait a second, WTF did he just say? Let me put my earballs back into my ears and listen to it again. It was beyond freeing. Suddenly, divinity didn't feel like a personality test I was failing. It felt like something huge, even more gorgeous, kinder, less like an authority figure and more like a loving source, presence, and force of my own life and the life of everyone and everything, for crying out loud. A silent, spiritual yes, Queen. Because I always thought the idea that the ultimate source of love and creation looks like a cranky man who watches your every mistake and keeps a ledger felt less like divine magnificence and more like a cosmic HR manager who gave up on all of his lifelong dreams to play God. To me, that version of God felt crushing to the human spirit. Because to me, it feels like it disconnects us from the magnificence of God. A God that isn't a being or a personality, but being itself. The source behind the source. The metaphor that breaks all metaphors. Campbell said every religion is true, one way or another. It's true when it's understood metaphorically, but when it gets stuck in its own metaphors, interpreting them as facts, then you are in trouble. And I just paused the TV and stared at the ceiling like, holy cannoli. This man just blew up reality as it had always been told to me, but deep down, I always felt it was actually like this in one sentence. All of those stories and myths were telling us about ourselves, helping us to understand ourselves and our lives. Campbell and Moyers talk about how the story of creation is similar in many ancient texts, from the Bible to the Song of the World, from a legend of the Pima Indians to the Hindu Upanishad. In the Bible it says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was moving over the face of the waters, and God said, "Let there be light." In the Song of the World from a Legend of the Pima Indians, it says, "In the beginning there was only darkness everywhere, darkness and water, and the darkness gathered thick in places, crowding together and then separating, crowding and separating." And in the Hindu Upanishad, it says, "In the beginning there was only the great self, reflected in the form of a person. Reflecting, it found nothing but itself, and its first word was, 'This am I.'" So it's kind of like it all starts in this formless darkness of the void, kind of like being in one of those sensory deprivation floating space tanks where all sensory stimulation is removed, and you get in there and it's pitch dark and totally silent, and you're floating in this salty water, and it's like, whoa, it is so dark and quiet in here. And then your mind starts racing, and there's like 1,000,000 thoughts going through your head all at the same time, colliding with each other. And there's like a war and a race and a dance routine going on in your head all at the same time. But eventually your mind quiets down, and then everything becomes completely still. If you don't lose it. I mean, sometimes people lose it and then they have to get out. And that's okay. Just try again another time, maybe. Maybe it's not for everyone. It's like everything from the physical world is out of the way. And as soon as that happens, there is a moment when you can feel your connection with your own beingness. You feel your soul, the essence of your life, and you can feel and experience yourself. And you're like, whoa, I am part of something really, 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 really vast and transcendent. Whoa. And something in you shifts. And you feel renewed, like a whole new you. You experience a new perspective of and version of yourself, and maybe you feel inspired to create a new way of being yourself in the world, or maybe you get a great idea for a book, or work of art, or career, or maybe a new understanding of how to solve a problem that has been going on in your life for a long time. And that's the creation process in a nutshell, or in a space tank, I mean. But again, it's not for everyone, but they're really cool. And if you're not sure, check with your doctor. Anywho, but I think that those cycles of darkness and light and renewal actually occur in our lives all the time. Like when we experience times in our lives where we're struggling and we might feel a sense of darkness, and solutions or direction have not yet been formed in our minds. And so maybe if we could see these times as conditions for something that is trying to be born through and out of us, a new understanding of ourselves and of life, an old wound or pain transforming into a renewed strength or gift in us, or maybe a new life experience, a new job, relationship, etc. We might see these situations differently. And maybe we could breathe through and move through these difficult times with a bit more understanding. And although the dark times in our lives may still be challenging, we could recognize that we may be being moved towards something that wants to be realized in us. Campbell explains that in the creation story of the Hindu Upanishad, it says that since the creation of life is poured forth from the Creator, that the Creator is the creation, and vice versa, and that when we, as the creation, realize this, we become in this creation a creator. Say that 10 times fast. And Campbell says that's the clincher. When you know this, then you've identified with the creative principle yourself, which is the God power in the world, which means in you. Because, what if the burning bush wasn't about botany gone wild, but about awakening? What if stories of birth were about spiritual possibility? What if stories of conflict and resolution were about making peace with ourselves? What if all of the myths were meant to point us toward a truth so big, so unfathomable, it had to be dressed up in story so we wouldn't run screaming? It's too much! It's just too much! My brain is exploding!
and I'm having a flashback to Woodstock and I wasn't even there.
What if myth is poetry for the soul, and how humans have always made sense of the terrifying fact that we're here and we don't know why, and someday we'll die, and in the meantime we have to pay taxes and figure out how not to lose our shit when Mercury's in retrograde. When I first watched the entire Power of Myth series in the early 2000s, on the DVD box set I bought off the PBS after watching some of the Power of Myth episodes while they were running one of those PBS fundraising marathons, where whenever they get into a juicy part of whatever program they're playing during the fundraising marathon, they cut in for the fundraising part with a nice lady who looks like a museum tour guide and her male counterpart, a retired social studies teacher. We know how much you're enjoying the Power of Myth. And you're like, yeah, I was. Was is the operative word, Gail. I was enjoying the Power of Myth. And just as I was about to get my soul's deepest question answered, you guys got to cut in with the fundraiser stuff. So, of course, I donated $150 so I could get the DVD box series, which I now have on my bookshelf to make myself look interesting, because, of course, I had to purchase it again and download it from my streaming service of choice. Anywho, back in the ancient times of the early 2000s, once my DVD set came in the mail, I was fucking excited, y'all. Excited like a kid getting a baseball card in the mail in the 80s. And this was the episode that knocked me straight on my spiritual ass. The Message and the Myth. The second conversation, aka episode 2 of the Power of Myth series. Listen, if you thought myths were just bedtime stories for ancient people who hadn't discovered benzos yet, strap in, because you're about to get your mind blown. And I don't know why you would want to be strapped in while you're getting your mind blown, but these are just the colloquial sayings I put together like a colloquial mashup that seems grotesque and somewhat nightmarish. Any hoodles, what I'm trying to say about the message and the myth is that it's not just a chitty chat about once upon a time long ago in faraway land stories. It's a deeply relevant, slightly brain-exploding conversation about how humans, since the dawn of time, have tried to answer life's big-ass questions without curling into the fetal position and staying there until help arrives. Help obs being mythology. But before we get into it, I need to explain the evolution of the word / term / idea / interpretation / I don't even know what I'm talking about anymore. Oh yeah, the word myth. The word myth was originally a term to describe a story that holds truth, coming from the Greek word mythos, which means story, speech, or account. So, once upon a time, the word myth was used to describe a sacred story that provided deep truth and helped humans not completely lose their minds trying to understand death, love, thunderstorms, and why toddlers are basically drunk panda bears. Early myths were not seen as false, and myth was not used in the way that we in our modern culture have come to use the word much of the time. Myths were meaningful stories which served as symbolic instruction manuals to explain the mysteries of life, death, nature, and divine, and how to survive the chaos of existence. Helpful, right? And cultures like the Greeks, Egyptians, Norse, and indigenous peoples everywhere treated myths as true in the sense that they revealed something essential about reality, even if not factually true. The usage of the word myth to mean a lie or false belief came much later, during the Age of Enlightenment in the 17th and 18th centuries, when European intellectuals began to value scientific reason and empirical facts over traditional beliefs and storytelling. Which is all fine and good, but it's like, you don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Which, BT dubs, is a terrible saying. I mean, did people actually do that?
Where's the baby?
Son of a bitch! I threw the baby out with the bathwater!
Oh well, I guess we'll have to make another one.
You men are all alike!
So basically, the Age of Enlightenment rolled in like a know-it-all kid with a microscope, yelling, "If you can't measure it, it's bullshit." And suddenly, the word myth got demoted from sacred wisdom to cute but delusional, like little Edie in Grey Gardens. Both myths and religious ideology began to be seen as primitive, irrational, and false compared to science during this time. So the word myth evolved, or devolved, if you will, to mean something made up, superstitious, or untrue. Basically, a charming fairy tale people used to believe before we got smart. Oh, you know, us humans love to be extreme. Oh, how we dislike balance.
Balance? Won't do it. Don't like it.
Like free thinkers couldn't also enjoy the ancient wisdom and deep human truths communicated by mythology. It's like our minds are free to think whatever we want. Yes, and that is wonderful. And we're not alone on the planet with only our noggins to figure it all out. And we can lean into the millennia of human experience of those who came and died before us to give us clues on how to get through some of the same personal story arcs we all go through. So the cultural shift from mythic consciousness, symbolic thinking, to rational scientific consciousness, literal thinking, removed the value that can be gained from allowing myth to communicate with us on that deep symbolic soul level. Fast forward to the modern age, and thanks to people like Joseph Campbell, Carl Jung, and others, in the 20th century, there's been a push to remember that mythology isn't about factual history. It's about psychological and spiritual truths. And we were reminded that myths weren't trying to predict the weather or win Jeopardy. They were and still are soulful cheat codes for decoding the messy, beautiful disaster of being alive, giving us maps for our inner lives, not news reports about the outer world. Because myths are not warning us about monsters that we need to be afraid of and hide from out there, but to recognize that the spiritual essence of our being and the energy of the source of life that flows through us is more powerful than any parts of our own psyches that we may actually be afraid of in ourselves. Our anger, hatred, doubt, rage. Myths remind us that we can let go and allow the source of life that flows through us guide us. Myths say yes to all the aspects of the human psyche and help guide us through times that might feel challenging because of intense inner emotional conflict, and they speak to our spiritual essence while we are living in the natural physical world. Campbell gently drags all of us out of the land of literalism and into the real meaning and message of myth, explaining that myths aren't historical accounts or moral instruction manuals. They are metaphors that show us how we can live through the unbearable beauty and absolute batshit chaos of being alive into something we can wrap our brains and hearts around. He says myths are clues to the spiritual potentialities of the human life, that myths can bring us back to our vast spiritual nature, to our spirituality when we get caught up in the physical world, saying mythology is the song of the universe, which I thought was really great news because I thought it might be It's a Small World after all. And once they play that song, it's all over but the crying. But maybe that's the song you hear when you fall into a black hole in outer space. So maybe when you're flying around in outer space, buyer beware. And once you realize that myths aren't meant to tell you what to believe, but how to feel your way through the mystery of life, you never look at life the same way again. And let's be honest, it's a lot easier to deal with your next identity crisis when you can say, oh, I'm not losing it. I'm just on a hero's journey. And isn't that great? Because Campbell says myth is the field of reference. Metaphors referring to what is absolutely transcendent. As Campbell and Moyers describe it, what can't be known. And the ultimate word in our language for that which is transcendent is God. In The Message and the Myth, Moyers asks Campbell if he remembered what went through his mind the first time he saw Michelangelo's creation of Adam. And Campbell replies, by the time I became aware of that, my notion of divinity was not quite so personal, you know. The idea of God that he's a bearded old man of some kind with not very pleasant temperament, that is, I would say, a sort of materialistic way of talking about the transcendent. Now, for me personally, to be clear, I personally have zero beef with people who find comfort in that image. I mean, Michelangelo painted it with some serious flair. I mean, come on. That God has amazing forearms. That God has presence. Campbell wasn't offering a replacement for God, but a more spacious view of God. One that didn't need to resemble a person to be present. My only exposure to spirituality and God growing up was the Catholic Church. And don't get me wrong, there are a lot of rituals in the Catholic Church that I find absolutely beautiful. But there were some things I didn't quite understand. And I remember that as far back as I can remember, I had my own feelings and ideas about the transcendent. And I don't know if you know a lot about Catholicism, but there is a prayer that you say before you're able to take the Holy Communion. That wafer that is supposed to melt in your mouth, but it really mostly just gets stuck to the roof of your mouth. And I have had to physically remove it with my finger because it was literally plastered to the roof of my mouth. And maybe that's where they got the idea for plaster, you know? Anyways, before you can take communion, you say a prayer that goes, Lord, I am not worthy to receive you, but only say the word and I shall be healed. And when I was a kid, I was very confused by that. Like, what would be the purpose of us all being here if it were just for us to feel like crap about ourselves? And it just never made sense to me. Again, for people who practice Catholicism, please forgive my candor, and I am a firm believer of whatever speaks to someone spiritually. Amen to that. But I started asking these big spiritual questions when I was a little, and for me, the idea of God as a person felt like trying to shove the whole infinite mystery of existence into one guy and calling it a day. So when Campbell said that the word God points to the mystery rather than trying to define it, was like realizing my GPS is just letting me know all the different ways I can take to arrive where I want to go, not demanding I take one way. I can still take the scenic route or avoid highways if I like. I can still trust my gut, and I'm not going to get smited for skipping the off-ramp, because many of us were introduced to God through very human-like traits: anger, judgment, intolerance, the occasional threat of eternal damnation. But maybe that's not because people were trying to scare us. Maybe it's because humans need human-shaped stories to begin with. We need something familiar before we can handle the mystery. But if we're lucky, we grow into the next layer, the mythic one, the metaphor, the version of God that doesn't look like anyone, but is in everything. So, no, you don't have to believe in Zeus hurling lightning bolts to get something out of myth. You just need to be a living, breathing human with questions like, what the fuck is the point of all of this? And why do I cry at sappy commercials? One of the most brilliant points Campbell makes in The Message and the Myth is when he says, taking any of the myths literally is like going to a restaurant and eating the menu. You miss out on the tasty, soul-nourishing part. And yet, how many of us were force-fed spiritual facts growing up? Like, here's what to believe. No questions, no nuance, and definitely no metaphors. Trying to digest dogma that never really made sense to our soul. Because when you take myths literally, they can become very rigid and dogmatic and frankly, kind of limiting. But when you treat them as metaphors, they breathe, they evolve, they live, they stop being about who's right or wrong and start being about what it means to be a human in a world that is constantly reminding you that you are not in control. And what's amazing is that myth is universal. And incredibly, similar themes show up in every culture across every time period, whether it's a Hindu deity, a Navajo tale, or a Marvel origin story. We keep remixing the same themes because they're true. Not factually true, but emotionally, spiritually, I felt that shit in my bones true. And that's what makes The Message and the Myth so fucking powerful. It's about waking up to the fact that you already believe in something, because we all do. Whether it's science, astrology, therapy, or everything happens for a reason. You've got a mythic framework running in the background. The question is, Does it serve you, or is it quietly fucking your shit up? Campbell isn't trying to convert anyone. He's just offering a new lens, a reminder that life is more than just a to-do list and a death sentence. It's a sacred, ridiculous, terrifying, awe-inspiring experience, and maybe the stories we tell can help us not just survive it, but mean something inside it. So yeah, myth isn't just some crusty academic topic. It's your inner life, dressed up in dragons and gods and talking animals, so it can slip past your defenses and have a one-on-one chat with your soul. The message and the myth opened me up to my own inner life. I was able to feel my connection to everything as well as my own personal and spiritual autonomy. Campbell's teachings helped me understand that there is no one way to be, think, feel, and connect with the spiritual nature of ourselves and of life. That obedience to a dogma is man-made, and that spirituality is an experience we all have together, each in our own way. I am loving sharing the power of myth with you and the teachings of Joseph Campbell that opened my mind and my heart to myself and to the song of the universe and the magnificent mystery that is in, as, and with all of us. OMG, guys, we have some more to come with the power of myth conversation. I love this so much. This has been the Spiritual Shitshow podcast. My name is Suzanne Soul. I am so grateful that you have joined me today, and I love you so motherfucking much. All right, darling, roll it. Yes, for the next one, my beloved.